Welcome to a place where stories touch the heart and remind us of the power of love, sacrifice, and hope. Here, you'll step into the shoes of someone who gave everything to protect their family and discover how courage can transform life even in the darkest moments. You'll follow the journey of finding light in unexpected places, like a garden growing in a cold, empty mansion, showing that joy can bloom anywhere. You'll witness how walls built from fear and loss can crumble when hearts truly see each other, and how love can grow even when it's forbidden or unexpected. And finally, you'll experience the magic of second chances, how healing, trust, and understanding can turn pain into a story of hope and connection. If you believe in love, resilience, and the beauty of new beginnings, you're in the right place. I never imagined life could change in an instant. One moment, our small apartment was filled with laughter, with the smells of my mother's cooking, with the sound of my younger brother playing in the corner. My father's face always had a kind smile, tired but warm. In our little home, though small, felt like a safe world. I loved every corner of it. I loved the plants by my window, 10 small green friends that I watered every day. They were alive, and in some way I felt I was alive with them. Then everything shifted. My father became sick. I remember the day he couldn't even get out of bed. His face had lost its color, and the energy that had always surrounded him was gone. The business we relied on crumbled with him, and suddenly the walls of our apartment felt like they were closing in. Money that had been just numbers on a page became a monster that chased us, and the bank's threats whispered through our small rooms. My mother cried quietly at night, and I could hear her from my bedroom, her sobs slicing through the stillness. I wanted to comfort her, but I felt powerless. Then the man came. He was a stranger, dressed in black, a lawyer who introduced himself with a name I would never forget. He spoke of someone rich, someone who had seen our struggles and was willing to step in. At first, it sounded like a miracle, like the answer to silent prayers whispered in the darkness, but then he said the condition: marriage, 5 years, nothing more, nothing less. I froze. Marry a man I had never met. But the image of my father's grave face and my mother's tears pressed on my heart. I couldn't breathe at first, but slowly I understood. Love was not the question. Here, family was. The next day I met him, all handsome yet distant. His eyes were cold, his words precise. The contract was laid out before me: rules, schedules, restrictions, boundaries. Rule 7 made my stomach twist. No love, and yet I signed. I signed because the safety of my family outweighed my own comfort, my own fear, my own heart. It was a simple line on paper, yet it carried the weight of my entire world. Life with him was cold at first. The apartment was massive, pristine, almost museum-like. We shared rooms yet did not share lives. Dinners were brief, conversations shorter. He was polite, distant, present yet absent. I felt invisible, and the loneliness threatened to swallow me. But I brought my plants with me. They became my lifeline, my reminder that life could still grow, even in the harshest conditions. I turned a glass-walled room into a garden. I scrubbed floors, swept away dust, planted seeds, nurtured them. And slowly my heart began to breathe again. Even though he did not understand at first, he allowed me that space. He did not stop me, did not question me, did not interfere. It was the only place that felt entirely mine in that vast house, and in nurturing my garden, I nurtured myself. I learned patience, I learned hope. I learned that even small actions can give life meaning. Each morning, I greeted my plants, talked to them, watched them grow. They reminded me that I was capable of growth too, that even when life demanded sacrifice, beauty could still exist. Then something shifted. Slowly, imperceptibly, he began to notice. It started with a glance at a red rose, a comment about a sunflower. He lingered longer in the room, did not rush away. He asked questions, soft ones, careful ones, and though he did not say much, the weight of his presence became different. It was no longer a cold duty but a conscious choice. He stayed, he noticed, he saw me, but the true test of sacrifice came later, when my father needed emergency surgery. I could not ask him for help. The contract did not cover this. This was beyond the rules, beyond the safety he had already given my family. I looked at my garden, at the plants I had nurtured with my own hands, and knew what I had to do. I began to sell them, my own small treasures, the only thing I had built that belonged entirely to me. My hands shook, my chest ached, tears blurred my vision, but I could not stop. My family needed me, and then he stepped in. He did not hesitate. He paid the bills, arranged the surgery, ensured my father's health. He broke the contract quietly, not with words of obligation, but with action born from care. That moment, when he crossed the boundary of the rules, when he acted not because he had to, but because he chose to, made everything I had sacrificed feel lighter. My family was safe, my father was healthy, and the weight on my shoulders lifted. In the months that followed, life shifted again. The cold distance softened. Garden grew, our interactions grew. I learned that sacrifice is not just about giving up something. It is about creating something larger than oneself. I had given my comfort, my certainty, my heart in part, and in return, my family survived. And slowly, without expectation, my own life began to return to me, not in the form I imagined, but in a form that felt true, alive, and meaningful. Sacrifice is not easy. It is raw, it is painful, and it leaves scars. But it can also create the ground for growth, for hope, for life beyond fear. And in that garden, among the plants I nurtured with trembling hands, I found not only survival, but the first whispers of a life renewed. The mansion was huge, towering above the city, shining with glass and steel, but it felt like a hollow shell. Every corner was clean, every surface polished, every room perfectly arranged, but empty. Walking through it for the first time, the echo of my footsteps sounded louder than my own heartbeat. I had everything I could ever need: food, clothes, a soft bed, money in my bank account. And yet, I felt smaller than I had ever felt in my life, like a shadow moving through someone else's world. Rules were simple and unyielding. We lived together, yet apart. Separate bedrooms, scheduled dinners, occasional appearances at parties. No love, no warmth beyond polite greetings. At first, I wandered the halls like a ghost, carrying only my thoughts, my fear, and the memories of my family. Laughter nights were the hardest. The silence wrapped around me like a heavy blanket, and I longed for something, anything, to reach out and remind me that I was still alive. Then I found the glass room, a door tucked at the end of a long hallway, covered in dust and shadows. Sunlight streamed through its transparent walls and ceiling, but it was abandoned, empty, and yet in that emptiness I saw a possibility. I saw life waiting to be created. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The air was stale, thick with neglect, but I smiled. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. I started cleaning. My hands were raw from scrubbing, my back ached, my arms tired from lifting buckets of water and soap. But with every sweep of dust, every streak of sunlight I uncovered, I felt a little more alive. I imagined the space as a garden, a place where color could return to my world. I bought soil, pots, seeds, small plants. I learned about sunlight, about watering, about how fragile life could be, and yet how determined. Each seed I planted felt like a promise to myself, a declaration that even here, in this cold, rigid place, life could grow. Days passed. I spent every morning in that room. I watered my plants, talked to them softly, watched them stretch toward the sun. The smell of earth, the green of new leaves, the small buds that hinted at flowers, it became my sanctuary. I began to notice the small joys I had forgotten, the softness of soil between my fingers, the way morning light changed the colors of the room, the quiet satisfaction of nurturing something from nothing. In creating this garden, I discovered a rhythm to my days, a purpose that belonged only to me. He noticed me there eventually. At first, he walked past without comment, his eyes glancing briefly at the glass room. Then one day he stopped. He did not enter. He did not touch the plants. He simply stood at the doorway, observing. I felt a strange warmth, not from his presence, but from the understanding that someone saw me, even if just for a moment. Later, he lingered longer, asked a question here, a comment there, and slowly, the rigid walls of our unspoken contract began to crack. The mansion was still cold, the rules still strict, but within that room, something grew that neither of us could define fully yet. I started writing about the garden, recording the growth of my plants, the lessons I learned from each flower. Red roses taught patience, sunflowers taught persistence, lavender taught resilience. Every new leaf, every bloom, reminded me that growth was possible even under the harshest conditions. I shared my notes, my photos, and slowly people began to notice. Messages came, small at first, then more. Someone said my garden made them smile. Someone else said they felt inspired to care for something of their own. Even in isolation, even under rigid rules, the joy I had created reached beyond the walls. The mansion, for all its cold perfection, had become a backdrop, a canvas for life rather than a prison. The glass room became a world of my own making. I could make decisions here, feel pride, feel connection, feel alive. It was not love in the traditional sense, not yet, but it was a deep, nurturing emotion that reminded me I had a voice, a presence, a claim on my own existence. And that was the beginning of change, quiet and steady, like the slow unfurling of a leaf. Evenings were no longer just hours to survive. I lingered in the garden, checking every plant, noting the subtle shifts in color, the growth of roots beneath the soil. I found rhythm in the watering, in cleaning, in tending. My days became marked by life rather than absence. I began to see him differently too, not just as a man bound by a contract, but as someone who noticed me, who allowed me this space, who quietly respected the life I had chosen to cultivate. The smallest gestures became meaningful, a nod, a comment, a glance. He was there, and his presence no longer felt like a shadow, but a quiet companion to my own growth. I realized then that life does not always arrive fully formed, and joy does not always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it begins in the smallest of places, in a sunlit glass room, in soil under fingernails, in watching fragile green shoots defy emptiness. Even in a world dictated by rules, even in a home that could have been a prison, hope can be grown, nurtured, and shared, and when it is, it transforms not just the space around you, but the person you thought you were into someone alive, someone capable of love, capable of light. And so, in that abandoned room, with soil under my nails and sunlight on my face, life quietly returned to me. At first, there was nothing between us except the rules of the contract. He was a stranger, a man I had agreed to marry not for love, but for the safety of my family. His presence was formal, polite, and distant, a reminder of the bargain that bound us. We shared a house, meals, even a roof, but there were no hearts entwined, no warmth in our words, no space for affection. He did not see me, not really. I moved quietly through the rooms, a ghost of a life that had once been mine. But life has a way of slipping past rules. Small things started to change the edges of that cold space. The garden became the first bridge between us. I had carried my plants into the mansion, carefully arranging them in the sunlit glass room. They grew, and so did something in him. He noticed first in passing, a glance at a red rose, a quiet comment on the color of a sunflower. At first, I dismissed it. He was still bound by distance, still a man who had built walls around himself, but slowly the moments became more. He lingered longer, his presence stretching beyond duty. It was never sudden. There were no grand confessions, no sweeping gestures of emotion. It began in observation, in choice. He chose to notice, and that choice mattered more than words. I caught him one evening standing by the garden door, looking at the plants as if trying to understand them, trying to understand me. I felt a pulse of hope that startled me. He did not speak, did not touch, did not intrude. He simply allowed the life I had created to exist and flourish. That permission, simple as it was, began to dissolve the distance. We were still bound by the rules, separate rooms, scheduled dinners, polite interactions, and yet every shared glance, every small gesture, chipped away at the cold formality of our relationship. When he asked about the roses, when he commented on the way sunlight hit the lavender, when he lingered near the garden longer than expected, I felt the first stirrings of something I had not anticipated. It was not love yet, not the deep, full kind, but it was a recognition of humanity. He saw me truly, not just as a figure bound by contract, but as a person, fragile and alive. The breakthrough came in a moment I almost missed. He returned early one day, not for work, not for duty, but simply because he stopped by the garden. I was kneeling in the soil, planting new flowers, my hands dirty, my back aching. He watched quietly, leaning against the doorframe. There was no judgment in his eyes, no command, only attention. When he spoke, his voice was low, measured. "The flowers are nice." That was it. 2 simple words, but in those words I heard acknowledgment, presence, a recognition of the life I had built with my own hands. It was the first time I realized that love does not always arrive with fireworks or declarations. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it comes in the form of attention, choice, and respect. He did not force affection, did not demand a smile. He simply allowed connection, and in that space, walls began to fall. I began to notice him too. I saw the subtle way he lingered in the kitchen, the careful precision with which he attended to his own routines, the small kindnesses that were never required. He, too, was fragile, burdened by rules of his own heart, haunted by losses I could not yet name. When the first real moment of care came, it took me by surprise. I fell ill with a high fever, my body weak, my hands trembling. He came into the room, touched my forehead, brought medicine and water, called a doctor. He stayed, not out of obligation, not out of contract, but because he wanted to. He read to me from my own garden book, his voice gentle, patient. I closed my eyes and let myself feel it. Safety, presence, attention, care. In that quiet room, the walls between us cracked further. Something unspoken moved through us, a bridge built from choice, from seeing, from acknowledging each other's hearts. Days passed, and the small gestures multiplied. He lingered in the garden, asked questions about the plants, commented on the blooms. Our dinners lengthened. Conversations, brief at first, stretched into shared laughter, shared silence that no longer felt cold. I began to see past the contract, past the rigid rules, past the fear that had kept him distant. He was human. He was capable of tenderness, and he saw me, really saw me, in ways I had not expected. Love was not planned. It grew in the quiet moments, in the shared space of a sunlit room, in mutual recognition of fragility and resilience. It grew in the choice to stay, the choice to care, the choice to notice. It was not sudden or overwhelming. It was patient, careful, real. It was something built slowly, nurtured like the plants in my garden, a deep, unspoken understanding that heart could heal and connect even when rules said otherwise. In that space, I learned that love is not about grand declarations or easy beginnings. It is about vulnerability, about seeing someone fully and allowing them to see you. It is about moments, small and profound, where the human heart chooses connection over fear, compassion over distance, presence over absence. And when he finally spoke the words, "I care about you," it was not a contract, it was not obligation. It was the culmination of all those small choices, the breaking of barriers, the opening of hearts. Time has a way of softening wounds, though it cannot erase them. My family's struggles had left deep marks on all of us. My father's illness, the financial collapse, my mother's sleepless nights. I had carried the weight of these burdens silently, trying to protect them with every choice I made, and he carried scars of his own, invisible yet heavy, the memory of someone he had loved and lost, a love that had left a shadow on his heart, a fear that had built walls around him. We were both wounded, but in ways that neither of us could fully express at first. After the fever, after the small gestures of care, after weeks of quiet dinners and shared moments in the garden, I began to see him differently. He had always been reserved, always measured, always careful not to overstep. But he was present, really present, in ways that slowly chipped away at the distance between us. The first time he smiled at something I had done, a small smile that was genuine, I felt a flicker of warmth in a heart that had been frozen for too long. It was a reminder that people could heal, that they could still find connection even after loss. Healing did not come overnight. Some nights, memories of his past love, of my family's pain, would hang between us like fog. He would stare at the city lights from the balcony, silent, and I would sit with my thoughts in the garden, the air heavy with the scent of flowers and soil. Yet even in those quiet moments, healing was taking place. It was subtle. It was in the way he lingered in the garden now, asking about the roses, noticing the sunflowers. It was in the way I allowed myself to relax in his presence, no longer feeling like a ghost in a house of rules. We were learning to trust slowly, through small, steady steps. When my father needed emergency surgery, again, my first instinct was panic. I thought I had already exhausted all possibilities, that I could no longer ask for help. But he surprised me. He did not hesitate. He stepped beyond the contract, beyond the rules, and ensured my father's health. He acted not out of duty, but out of care, and in that moment I realized how much trust could heal the deepest fears. My family's relief, their smiles, my father's brightened face, they became proof that pain could be replaced by hope, that second chances were possible. Our garden became the bridge between past and future. Every plant I nurtured, every bloom I cultivated, became a symbol of what could be restored. And he, who had once kept love at bay, began to invest in that life with me, not by words alone, but by presence. Sitting together in the garden, sharing stories about flowers, sharing laughter, sharing silence, we began to build something new. We were rewriting what it meant to be together, not constrained by fear or contract, but guided by trust and choice. The old contract, the one that bound us with rules and distance, became irrelevant. We had created our own rules now quietly, between moments of care and attention. Rule 1, honesty. Rule 2, shared time, not imposed but chosen. Rule 3, presence in small and meaningful gestures. The walls that had once kept our hearts distant now became a safe space for vulnerability. For the first time, I realized that love could be built from patience and understanding, from the courage to show one's scars and still be accepted. He shared stories of her, the woman he had loved and lost, and I shared the quiet fears I carried from watching my family struggle. We listened, truly listened, without judgment, without interruption, and in that listening, trust grew. I learned to let my guard down, and he did too. We healed not because the past was erased, but because we chose to face it together, to transform it into something that could nurture life rather than shackle it. The first time he kissed me without obligation, without protocol, without expectation, it was more than affection. It was an acknowledgement of our healing, of the trust we had built, of the life we were choosing to create together. My tears fell freely, not from fear, not from sadness, but from the relief of being seen, of being understood, of being loved in a way that honored the pain we had both endured. We celebrated small victories together, the blooming of a rare orchid, my father's recovery, the laughter of my brother as he wandered through the garden. Each moment became proof that second chances were real, that the heart could repair itself with time, care, and courage. He was no longer just the man of the contract. He was a partner, a companion, a witness to life renewed. And I was no longer the girl hiding in a mansion, invisible. I had a voice, a home, a heart that could give and receive. In the end, healing is not linear. It is messy, fragile, and often quiet. But when two hearts that have been broken choose to meet, to see, to care, and to trust, they can build a story that is stronger than pain, brighter than fear, and filled with possibility. And in that garden, surrounded by the life we had nurtured together, it felt like the beginning of everything. Thank you for joining me on this journey of courage, hope, and love. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that remind us that even in the hardest times, life, love, and light can bloom. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that might just change the way you see love and resilience. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that second chances are possible and that true courage can create miracles in the most unexpected ways. Until next time, keep believing, keep nurturing, and remember, love can grow where you least expect it.